From the Columbia University Language Resource Center, this is Said and Done, the podcast about languages and the people who speak them. Denzell Ivery, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here, Chris.
You are a first-year Master's in International Affairs student at the School for International and Public Affairs here at Columbia with a concentration in development and governance. And you're here today to speak about your language learning journey and its intersections with music and with international affairs. So to start off, why don't I ask you a little bit about your background and your background both with music and your initial exposure to language study?
I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. To my chagrin, I had to come to New York to get some training, but go Birds. And as a child, I started playing music. Maybe in I want to say fourth grade, I became a drummer. Started taking percussion lessons, xylophone, timpani, snare drum, things of that nature. Got interested enough to the point where I wanted to study more seriously. So I went to the Philadelphia High School for Creative and Performing Arts. There, I studied music, both instrumental and vocal music, as well as theater arts. So I was always on the stage. I was either on the stage, next to the stage, or under the stage doing something, performance art, music related. After that, I went to Temple University in Philadelphia, earned my music education degree in 2015, or I should say end of 2014. From there, took some time teaching in Philadelphia, while as I awaited to ship off to my Marine Corps boot camp training. So I went to Marine Corps boot camp in February of 2016, fully knowing that my job would be, because I passed an audition prior to enlisting, my job would be as a military musician in the United States Marine Corps. So I played drums with the Marines, percussion. Once again, imagine, at a football or baseball game when the military service people come out in uniforms and play the national anthem or something. I was one of those guys, one of those people, I should say. And then I sort of did a career shift in the military. So we have in the Marine Corps what is called secondary assignments. I decided to pivot and go into a secondary assignment, what's considered Marine Embassy Security Guard, specialists essentially. And these are the people at embassies throughout the world that when you go into the embassy, you might see a Marine at the front door, opening the door, saluting someone, or handing you or taking your ID or something like that. So I was one of those guys, which was really cool because this was now my first experience going out of the U.S. to live for an extended amount of time. So I went to Hungary for a year. After that, I went to Russia for a year and some change. And then after that, I went to Kyrgyzstan for a year and some change. So I didn't drop the musical side, but this is where the language thing kind of came into play, because at this point now I find myself in what I considered foreign lands to me, and being able to utilize the local language became a very important thing for me, as well as something like a necessity to get around, especially when I was outside of the four walls of the embassy, the embassies in which I was working. I enjoyed that experience so much that about a year and a half ago, I separated from the United States Marine Corps, honorably separated. Still am once a Marine, always a Marine, but wanted to see where I could take my life with the background and the experience that the Marines and my high school training and my college training and all these things. How can I put these together to maybe build a very particular niche career for myself? And so I actually, upon separating, applied for this program, a Boran Award, if you are familiar with those. And I studied Turkish in Azerbaijan for an 8-month period with a little bit of a prep period prior to going to Azerbaijan, and used a lot of the same techniques and ideas that we'll discuss today while I was there to really drill down the Turkish and the Azerbaijani, while also obviously having this Russian background from living out there in the embassy, and some of this Hungarian background as well. So that's as short as I can tell you. There's a lot more in there. There was a lot more meals and such that I've eaten, but that's as short as I can get it. How I got here today.
Well, that's a fascinating summary of your biography, and it puts together a number of things that I don't think people often put together necessarily: music, service to the country, language learning, cultural engagement. And I'm curious to get a sense of the progression of that journey and perhaps some greater degree of detail. It seems to me from what you've described that really like music is the first layer of this building in a way. So can you talk about what your engagement with music has been like? Why was that really the first love, if you will, that you had, or the first thing that you engaged with the most? And then how you decided that you were going to pivot your love of music into a career with the U.S. Marines?
Yeah, so growing up, I was surrounded by music. I think many U.S. citizens, but especially Black Americans, Black U.S. citizens, find themselves in church settings. So I grew up in the Baptist church, and that was, you're pretty much learning how to sing at the same time you're learning how to speak in those environments. So I was on children's choirs and such, maybe even at 6 years old, 7 years old, even before I started formally playing instruments. And I do remember as a child at one point, I played music. My brother played music. My sister played music. The household was pretty musical in the academic world and in our school programs, especially middle school. So I remember when I was too young to have started playing music. I think I was in third grade. You had to wait until fourth grade. My sister is a sixth or seventh grader. And I remember going to one of her concerts, and this drummer, Anwar Marshall, who is a great drummer, like today, still on the scene,
Yeah.
very much so. And this is him at maybe 11 or 12 years old. But I remember seeing this drummer on this drum set, and I said, whoa, this is the coolest thing ever. And I don't think I was noticing. Before, when I was singing, the music was supporting me. But in that performance setting, when I'm watching and actively listening and actively in awe, I said, I want to be able to do that. I don't think today I can even do what Anwar Marshall was doing at 11 years old when I watched him in this concert. But I decided, yes, I want to go ahead and try to learn how to play drums. So my first instrument was drums, and I truly, truly appreciated that because one, as a 12-year-old, you might be a little frustrated every so often. You might want to hit something. So every Tuesday or whatever, Mr. Matola would come through and say, all right, it's time to hit these drums. And it was super fun, in a group, hitting, whether it was pads, big bass drums, smaller snare drums, tambourines. We were trying to get, the whole gamut of things. And then when it comes to the journey, I was really, really interested in music to the point where it became a driving force in my life. I was taking Saturday classes for percussion, whether that be drum set or world percussion or classical, Western music, think timpani, xylophone, marimba, things of that nature. I was like surrounded by this. It was always a concert to do. It was always a performance to either go to or give. It was always a lesson to take. And there was always music happening around me. So that was the cool part of sort of my childhood, was that I was surrounded by music. My mother really, really sort of stressed the fact that we didn't have many options in this world, and sometimes people in the positions that we were in are seen as, with their back sort of against the wall. So she said, I'm going to put you in as many different programs that will ensure that I have done my best to give you all the tools to be successful. And it turns out these musical tools were the tools that I myself and my brother really leveraged to kind of to catapult us to the next stages of our lives. Because once it was time to graduate high school and move towards thinking of a professional or an academic journey, my brother did it in the opposite of me. He went from high school directly to the United States Marine Corps to play saxophone and bassoon with them. And this was before I pretty much knew that there was a possibility to be a musician in the Marine Corps. He got called by a recruiter one day. I walk into the house. There's a guy in a military uniform there. And like me and my mom thought my brother was getting drafted or something. we had no idea why this guy was here. But he ends up explaining that to us, and eventually my brother ships off and does the boot camp thing. And once I saw him after the, we call it the transformation,
Uh,
once I saw him go from civilian to Marine, and then more importantly, once I saw him do a parade, I think it was in New Jersey, I went to see, because he was stationed in South Carolina or Quantico, Virginia, a couple different places. But with whatever unit, I was able to actually see him do his thing, if you will. And I said, hey, this is super cool. I want to do this.
Yeah.
But at the same rate, I wanted to go to college first and get my undergraduate degree, because I'm the baby in the household that I grew up in. So my sister had gone to college, my brother had gone to the Marine Corps, and I said, since I'm the baby, I'm going to be able to do both. So went to college, well, with all intents set on becoming a United States Marine Corps postgraduate, a United States Marine post graduation. So in college, I continued that musical journey, but then of course, as a music education major, you have to now get introduced to different elements of music, right?
Yeah,
It can't just be what you just played. You need to be able to teach someone how to play the flute, how to play the violin, you need to know how to conduct a choir, an orchestra, a band, a marching band. It doesn't really matter. So all of those elements, I started having to really dive deeper into. And I remember, when I was student teaching in Philadelphia to get my certification, my cooperating teacher, he told me, you are not allowed to play your instrument, while you're delivering these instrumental instruction. So I had to learn how to, I'm not as good as this sixth grader on flute, but I'm playing this flute with this sixth grader because of this restriction. And we'll get to this later, but me being able to humble myself and understand that, okay, I see this music in front of me. I know exactly how this music should sound. I know what feelings this music, I think I know at least what feelings this music should evoke, what tonality it is in, what speed it should be, all these things. But the execution was not perfect because I was outside of my element. I was not on a xylophone or a vibraphone or anything reading this music. I was playing it with the flute in hand, and I had to think to myself, oh wait, which fingering is it for this flute? I mean, for this note, how hard should I blow? How soft should I blow? All these different elements that made me uncomfortable, especially when I'm doing this with maybe somebody 20 years younger than me, like, helping them get better on their horn. It was really humbling for me, and it taught me, oh, okay, just because I have fluency in one field doesn't mean that that's going to transfer immediately when I try to apply it somewhere else. But what I do know is that fluency that I do have informs me of what I should be considering as I struggle to be subpar on the flute. And eventually I got pretty decent, at least good enough for a sixth grader.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're saying that, but I'm really struck by the fact that you do have fluency in so many different instruments. I attempted to play various instruments very poorly at all, on all counts. And so you went to college, you studied musical education, and then you went to the Marine Corps. Was that a challenging transition? Was it easy to make that transition? What was that transition in your life like?
It definitely was challenging. It was quite possibly the entire experience, aggregated, was probably the most challenging thing that I've ever done, that I had ever, and maybe ever will do in my life. But my musical background, my ability to work in ensembles, my ability to work in small groups, my ability to listen, my ability to critically listen, critically think about what I'm doing in active time as I'm trying to, play with a group of 120 people, or sing in a choir of 300 people. How do I fit in? How do I blend? How do we have a symbiotic approach to to this experience? And then utilizing tools to ensure that we are playing the music, quote unquote, correctly, right? Those principles, those ideas transfer immediately to military life. I'm now in a unit of people that I don't know, but we all have similar background, like training backgrounds, and we know what the mission is, and we know what our left and right lateral limits are, as in, how fast can we go? How slow can we go? How many people can we take? What type of logistical considerations must we account for? All those things, those same things are done when you're playing music, when you're singing music, especially in a group setting.
So it seems like your musical background gave you this framework, this mental framework, and you used that in the Marines to understand, I think maybe what might be one of the central concepts of being in the Marines, which is it's not a solo act. It's more like a symphony or more like a chorus, something like that.
Exactly.
Does that seem right to you?
That was right on the nose.
Okay. Yeah. And so you had a successful career there, and you had your second portion of your career with the Marines in a slightly different capacity, one that really required, I guess, a greater degree of cultural and linguistic engagement. So can you talk about that process in your mind of realizing, okay, now I'm in Hungary, because you mentioned that your first year was in Hungary when you were in the second part of your career with the Marines. So can you talk about your blossoming realization that you needed to engage with the Hungarian language and with Hungarian culture?
Yes. So admittedly, the COVID-19, that's a dark time, in world history, and many horrible things came from that, right? For me, that was in 2020. I went to Hungary, and so I was sent to Hungary in a time where most people were told that you must leave and go back to your home nation, if you will. I was there in the thick of it. That being said, because of certain rules and regulations, they even had the team that I was on, doing like split shifts and everything to make sure that we weren't interacting with each other, just in case somebody went down with COVID. It wouldn't affect operations but so much.
Yeah.
So I was living outside of the normal residence that I would have been living in, where COVID not a thing, and in this residence that was maybe 20-minute drive from the embassy, I was in a neighborhood. I was in a neighborhood. Like there's no other way to put that. And it was the type of neighborhood that was not like a big bustling neighborhood with a whole bunch of English speakers. If I went to what's called the ABC there, which is their corner stores, their corner markets, the cashier did not speak any English. Zero English. And so it was either only point and look like only point and make weird sounds to to get my my point across,
Yeah.
or say Kedek Sapin Edge, whatever, like, may I have this, and those type of, like, knowing that I was now like in the deep end, because if I couldn't utilize anything other than English, I would essentially either look like a fool or feel like a fool. And neither one of those outcomes was something that I wanted, especially as a representative of, American or U.S. values, if you will. So I think the necessity of that was really cool. And even before getting to Hungary, that was my first time going to be completely exposed and completely put into a place for an extended period. And the leadership said, yes, get online, find out about the culture, like learn things about the culture. And I remember the first thing I learned was, of course, how to say hello, right? And in Hungarian, it's szia or sziasztok, depending on if you're being formal or informal. And it's COVID time. We're finally here. Me and my buddy get there the same day. We got there together. It was two of us. Our assistant commander was giving us some training sessions and such. And he said, okay, go to lunch. Like, nothing's open, but they have, you can order and get the food from the window or whatever. So I remember being on the street and we're waiting to get this food from this place called Iguanas that's right around the corner from where we were working. And I was like, all right, let me try my hand to this hello thing to people on the street. And people were walking past me and I was going, see y'all, see y'all, see y'all, see y'all stalk. And no one was replying. And it took me a while. It took me much longer after that to realize culturally that like people in Hungary don't necessarily say hello on the streets,
Ah,
like many places that you go to. I mean, it's not even here in New York. It's not necessarily cultural to say hello to everyone on the street when you pass by them, right?
right.
so, so it was like great. Now that was my first crash course, and not only trying to show respect to a culture by learning something about them that's very like face value easy to do, but also saying dive in a little bit deeper and learn like what might be appropriate or inappropriate.
Mm,
But then a third lesson that I got from that, and it took a little time to really get that, is understanding that whenever we interact with people, you're reflecting both them and yourself. So finding that happy medium. I never really stopped saying hello to people in the street. I just maybe adjusted the times and situations in which I did that.
right.
And then learning to be, have more intention and more, if you will, strategic about the way you go and about your interactions was something that I found to be immensely powerful to my ability to occupy that space and feel comfortable while I was in what I consider to myself a foreign land.
Yeah, yeah. So you're in Hungary. You start to realize, you're making some progress. You're starting to be able to engage with people. You're gaining a deeper appreciation for like the cultural ways that people interact with each other. Nonetheless, Hungarian is a very challenging language to learn. So when you start to face this and look at this challenge, what do you do? How do you think about the challenge of learning Hungarian in those initial few weeks?
Well, this is where that musical background sort of starts kicking in. Hungarian was the first language at this point that I'm like, I would say, learning in a more formal setting. I had
Mm.
a teacher and everything, as I mentioned. But I started realizing, wait, I have a foreign language skill, quote unquote, which is my musical abilities. And I said, what would I do if I were trying to learn this, on the drums or learn this on the marimba? How would I engage with this? And I said, okay, I would slow it down. I would piecemeal it. I would really like separate things, make sure I can easily do this like maybe 100 times perfectly. I mean, it does get that intense. Like be able to play this 4 seconds of music perfectly 100 times, right?
Yeah.
And I started doing that, like, you know, breaking things up and saying, okay, I will perfect these basic, whether they're concepts, whether they're words, things that, sight words, like, for children, when children learn how to read, they see the and they know the, like that's a sight word, but they might not know what is sandwiched or what's the words that are sandwiching the, right?
Mm.
So I said, great, let me just take a very intentional approach and being able to learn what I can learn with the capacity that I do have right now. And at that time, I was not a language learner. I mean, as I said, the musical background was starting to inform me, but this was before I like really took a real intense language learning program or engaged with one. So I just said to myself, slow it down, you know that it's going to take some time, and also, you know, don't be bashful.
Yeah.
It's like go out there and allow the mistakes that you will make to inform the successes that you will have. And once I kind of got over myself and said, all right, like I'm gonna make a mistake. Someone's gonna think it's funny. Someone's gonna laugh at me. I'm gonna have to feel a little bit of embarrassment. It's like that's also the same thing that happens when you improvise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
in jazz music, that's someone's gonna look at you and say, why did you make that choice? And so when I was able to connect those same embarrassing moments that I will experience with those, if you will, embarrassing moments, musical moments that I had experienced, I was like, okay, it's the same exact thing. And I'm still here standing on my 2 feet, which means the worst that can happen is that I just feel bad about a choice that I made. And the best thing that can happen is that I learn from it so it can inform me for the next time I have the same sort of situation.
Yeah. So you then had that experience in Hungary, of what seems like pretty rapid language and cultural learning, and then you repeated that experience a few times. So can you comment on that trajectory? What it was like to sort of redeploy that initial language learning and go through that process with different languages. How were they different? How were those experiences different? And how did they connect too?
Well, firstly, three completely different settings. You know, going from Hungary to Russia to Kyrgyzstan, as as many connections as these countries do have with each other. Soviet bloc type of things.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. Completely different lands, completely different cultures, and so when I was in Hungary, I had the support of the language instructor, for example, and twice a week, we would sit down with Monica and like learn Hungarian, and that was sort of it. Actually became, I think, a compulsory type of thing eventually because we were so into it that they budgeted for us, and then became a you will take these classes for those guys or for those Marines, I should say. When I went to Russia now, it's like, all right, I can't speak Hungarian here in Russia. I can't sure there were Hungarian speakers in Russia just like there's Hungarian speakers in New York City, right? But this is not the target language. Mm-hmm. So I'm starting from zero again.
Yeah.
And in Russia, we didn't have a language training program. I tried to find as many resources as I could, and it took me a long time, especially I got there in 2021 November. So flash forward a few months later, we already know what happens, right?
Yes.
And I've remained there until 2023, March. So even as an American, as a U.S. citizen in Russia, it was almost a shift at a certain point into, sort of like, why are you here? How come you are here? How are you able to be here? Type of thing. So finding resources for language was always like, people were sort of standoffish with me. So at that point, it's like, all right, I get on YouTube. And this was before, as far as I know, before ChatGPT and everything like that. So it was like, all right, what resources are online? What can I listen to? What can I watch? So it's like, use Duolingo and learn the alphabet. But now you're here. So start reading the signs, start sounding stuff out, start trying to have these very surface levels, just see us talk with, the people in Russia. Then see us talk goes from see us talk. We got Privyet, Kaktila, all these things, right? And of course, the same sort of cultural, the need to understand the cultural atmosphere is there too. Luckily, Hungarians and Russians maybe share a few cultural similarities just because of the lineage, the connections that they have, and some of their historical lineage. So at that point, it was like, oh, now what I can do is, even though I can't speak Hungarian here, I can use the cultural experience that I gained in Hungary to inform how I can more actively and more appropriately engage in this culture. And so now I have my United States citizen background, my Western music background, my Hungarian experience to inform this experience in Russia. And then from there, a year and a half later, I go to Kyrgyzstan. And none of this is, I'm not picking any of these places. Like, this is me getting sent to all these places, right? And so Kyrgyzstan was now this really cool experience because one of the languages spoken there is Russian. Everyone essentially can speak Russian. So now I have this Hungarian experience that taught me how to think about the cultural aspect of it that I took to Russia. Now I have this Russian experience where I was eventually to find some support systems to learn to study Russian. Not super seriously, but I was eventually like going to one of the university language resource centers essentially, and going there twice a week and learning Russian. And I'm still taking classes like that even to this day, just online. And then when I get to Kyrgyzstan, it's like the cultural thing, the language thing. Now I can put that together. So now that experience becomes even easier because I know what to look for, what questions to ask, and sort of what points of contention I'll probably rub against, and how to sort of deconflict those to make myself feel comfortable, but more importantly, to make others feel comfortable as I try to engage with them as a foreigner in their eyes.
Yeah. By the way, it seems like a lot of Americans have maybe some idea of what it would be like to be in Hungary and have some idea what Russia is like, but I don't think Kyrgyzstan is really on the map for a lot of people. So What was it like for you to be there? What was that experience of just daily life like in Kyrgyzstan?
It was real interesting because they were speaking a language that I could understand, but they did not look like anyone that I had seen
Mm.
in Russia, other than the Kyrgyz that were living in Russia. Understandably, maybe for work reasons or something like
Yeah.
that. So it was like this culture is different. The people look different. But the signs are similar to what I'm used to. So it's like, is this familiar or is this foreign? Like I didn't know at the time. But what I did know is that this is now my third, foreign area, in the course of like less than 2.5 years. So I just like put the same, sort of perspective on as you went in that and say, let's learn. And what did I do? I spoke to the locals that worked, especially at the embassy. I spoke to the locals. I asked, U.S. citizens or locals at the embassies, what type of cultural things should I be aware about? And they were like, yeah, for example, if we're at dinner and one person gives a toast, everyone has to give a toast type of thing. Or, you know, uh, sort of these honorific considerations where maybe the guest of honor, if you will, is getting the largest piece of chicken or something
Okay.
like that. Like all these like small things that like really went far, especially when you implemented those things. Even like the time in which you show up for an event, like maybe in Kyrgyzstan, I'm not trying to make any generalizations, but maybe like being completely on time is not the most culturally
Ah,
relevant way of making it to an event.
right.
And obviously when you're in the government sector, it might be a little bit different. But we're talking about if someone invites you to their home, even dating, it was like, oh, taking flowers to dates and stuff like that. Like that's something that's like almost frowned upon at this point in the U.S. and it's like a necessary thing. When I was dating in Kyrgyzstan and even in Russia, there are flower shops every 500 feet, yeah,
Yeah,
which
you
is
have to
really
do
interesting.
it.
But yeah, just seeing the traditional clothes that they would wear. I would make it a point to go to events. It maybe took me 3 or 4 days before I went to an event where I cooked borsok, which is their national like fried bread type thing, and or went to like museums and stuff just to learn about the history and learn about like what makes Kyrgyzstan what Kyrgyzstan is. And it was super eye opening because this was the furthest east that I had gone at this point, and I was able to figure out what connections can I draw from my past experiences to inform this experience so I can successfully live in Kyrgyzstan. And I will say, I think on that third try was probably my best try
Hmm.
because I had practice. And yes, do I have friends that live in the other countries that I was stationed in? But I was in Kyrgyzstan again, maybe at this point, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. You know, I had friends that I could call up and say, "What you doing tonight? Let's hang out." Like and those same friends were super impressed because at that point, and this is after my Turkish learning journey, I'm now able to speak with them not just in Russian but in Turkish Kyrgyz type of like mixed language, and they were like incredibly impressed, and it only made our relationships blossom even more than what they were.
So would you say then, like the ability to go into a new country, speak a new language, and just kind of exist, to what extent is that like a skill, a meta skill in and of itself? And what are the components of that skill? What do now that you've done this a couple of times, if you were giving advice to somebody doing that, what would you say this is what you need to know how to do this?
One, yes, it is a skill. It's something, like I said, I'm trying to illustrate. I got better at it as I moved to place. And of course, not everyone has the opportunity to be able to just go from place to place. But if you find yourself in, as an anthropologist or a sociologist or, or just a lover of travel, you might, you might find yourself in these positions. And I think the biggest skill that you want to have or quality that you want to sort of embody is a growth mindset. That the idea of I've already made it to what I intended to make it to. That could be in business and in your career. It could be in your family ties. It could be whatever your relationships. Understanding that there's always more to learn. There's always more to be gained, especially when it comes to personal growth. Is integral. to this process of engaging with new cultures, especially at a rapid pace, if you will.
Yeah.
So I didn't go to Russia saying, "Oh, I know what the culture in Hungary is like. Uh, I'll just use the things that I learned there and only implement those tools." Like, no, it was like, let me utilize those tools to inform me, but also understand that this is a different situation, and also understand that I am constantly growing, hopefully. So instead of utilizing those tools as my only tools, I counted those tools as a part of my toolbox. And so I think that growth mindset is a big, big skill that, some people say, oh, it's just like the way you are. But, the way we think, we can inform the way we think and potentially even, morph it as needed. I would also say that learning how to be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
that goes with the growth mindset thing, but like, because like growth hurts,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we all remember like our growth spurts a little bit as children. It's like, Mom, why am I hurting right now? Like, you're growing,
Yeah, yeah.
and like, so those growing pains, like understanding like that will be uncomfortable. And I would say also accepting it, but even if someone's averse to accepting it, the acknowledgement of it is almost as important, because in these times when you are rapidly moving from place to place and culture to culture, it's like, if anyone is somehow completely comfortable in that rapid environment, that either means that they are the most talented person in the entire world, which could be the case, but on the opposite end, it might be that they're not paying attention to the world and the worlds in which they're moving to.
Yeah.
And then I guess, like, to take it back to sort of the music thing,
Yeah.
is understanding that, these principles of music, which, obviously not everyone listening to this is going to be a musician, but certain principles really, really stick, like the improvisational principles. They're the same in music learning and conversation having, and really, to an extent, and to cultural observation or understanding, listening and responding. Like that, I couldn't even tell you if I was talking about music just now or language. Like, listening and responding, that's a big thing. Understanding the context, whether that's the cultural context or from a musical side, what key are we playing in? What time signature are we playing in? Is this a waltz? Is this a blues? Like, understanding those elements. Knowing your licks. In music, we have these licks, right? There's this thing that most jazz musicians, I don't know, they might fight me on this, but if you say play the lick, they'll go da ba da ba da ba da. Like, that's a very famous, like, you can find instances of the greatest musicians playing those licks, like that specific thing that I just sort of sang, or their vocabulary, whatever those licks are, whatever those phrases, those short small phrases are, like understanding like that skill, understanding what licks you want to put in your tool bag, and then using them, and then also understanding that there's different ways to say the same thing, and that's a skill that needs to be developed. Understanding that there's different ways to say it, the same thing, and also understanding that there's different ways to receive like the same thing.
Yeah.
And once you kind of can get those sort of skills, and these are sort of, abstract skills, right? Like, it's not like, okay, in order to learn languages, you need to learn how to run 3 miles in 20 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
no, who knows? Maybe if you're in better shape or something, maybe you will be a better language learner. I don't know what the connection is there, but I think that a lot of these principles that connect to music really, really give a person the skills that are necessary to be able to engage in language learning, but more important, because language learning is a part of cultural learning. So to be able to engage in understanding and acknowledging cultural, the realities found within the cultures that you find yourself.
Yeah. Let me react to a couple of those. So I think when it comes to like being okay with discomfort, I think you're probably a better language learner than I am, because I get myself into a linguistic situation and I screw it up, and then I go home and I'm like, oh, I messed that up so badly. So it's good to be able to just shake it off and be like, I'm growing from this, and that's a really good way to put it. And I think a lot of people would benefit from keeping that in mind. The idea of licks, I think that's a really useful one. And it's one I found really powerful in my own language learning experience. There's a a singer-songwriter in Italy who I've really loved, Fabrizio D'Andrea, and I've listened to all of his music and I've memorized all of his songs. And I've even when he would give concerts, he would give like descriptions of the songs before he would play them, and I've even memorized all of those little speeches. And so I have this corpus of language that whenever I'm in a flowing conversation, I know I can pull out one of these things and I can just deploy it, and the person I'm talking to is going to be like, "Oh, okay, okay."
Exactly.
So knowing that you have these little things that you can take, these licks, that you can go to, that you can get to, um, can really help kind of like stabilize a conversation. You know what I mean? Um, and then the last one, what was the last one that you mentioned?
Just knowing that things can be perceived or it can be taken or given in different ways, understanding that element of language or cultural understanding.
Right. I think one of the consequences of that is you just have to kind of observe
Mm-hmm.
and be like, what am I seeing here? What's going on? Is this just a random thing that somebody's doing? Is there a reason why they're doing this? And so I think that language study and cultural engagement gives you that observational perspective too, and allows you to say, oh, maybe we've got a different time signature going on, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize it at first.
And then the other side of that, when we're talking, you know, the endogenous forces within us, a lot of times when we're doing this language thing, and it sort of connects it all, right? We get, we get really bashful because we don't know how to say something, and then maybe that informs the way in which uh, that makes us forget about the licks that we have because we're like we don't know what to say, how to say it, and now I'm so nervous that I can't even rely on the like my lowest levels of training and all that. It's like, hey, just so you know, the person typically somebody when you're speaking with a foreign language, uh, atmosphere in a foreign language atmosphere, typically one person on that in the conversation is going to be a better speaker or
Mm.
a more skilled speaker of whatever
Yeah,
language, right?
proficient. Yeah.
So it's like if you're more proficient than I am, let me just understand that if I'm saying this, I might think that I'm saying the dumbest thing. But when I speak Turkish, right, like even today, and I would say I'm, fluency, I never say I'm fluent in any language, but I would say I can hang in Turkish. But what I'm saying, a native Turkish speaker is not is maybe translating how I'm saying it to put the puzzle together in the more, you know, uh, appropriate or the more correct, if you will, way.
Yeah.
And so I don't always know which one of these is this is the most perfect way to say this thing or which one is not. But what I do know is that if someone's speaking to me in English and I can tell that English is not their first language, what I know is that everything that they say to me I understand. And if I need clarification because of maybe something that may have been said that I can assume was said incorrectly or did not express what they were trying to express,
Uh-huh.
that's when I can utilize my strength to ask those questions. And then we come to this sort of agreement, like either oh, you're welcome for helping you get to where you wanted to get, or thank you so much for elucidating me, like and making me understand what you were getting at. And so I think we get so caught up, oh, I can't say this exactly how I can say it in my native language. But it's like, no, there are multiple ways to express yourself. And, the pointing at the thing at the ABC in Hungary, like might be more effective than me using bad Hungarian sometimes, or it might be if you point, you are being rude or something. So like remembering that cultural stuff, how things are being taken, how are you expressing yourself, and it's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to be aware of, right? So I guess the last skill that sort of comes to me now is understanding that you will not be aware of all these elements at all given times at any given moment. It's just impossible.
Yeah.
So try your hardest to pull something that might be able to inform the way you're interacting with people, the way you're learning language, the way you're interacting with language. But know that every tool can't be used at every time. And so move forward with that in mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about how you've then pivoted back into a kind of academic register, both with your Boren scholarship and then now here at the School of International and Public Affairs. So how would you connect these cultural, linguistic, and professional experiences that you've had with the work that you're now doing and the ideas with which you're now engaging?
I think that these sort of principles and the experience that I've had and all the things that have informed me as I come to this point in my life where I'm studying international affairs in a very serious manner, I think they all connect. As in, that idea of ensemble, group work, teamwork, that can be applied to a high school marching band, that can be applied to a military unit, or that can be applied at the United Nations. And a lot of times I think we forget about the fact that everyone is going through the same sort of principles, no matter how you superimpose them. That struggle to know if they were understood correctly, that understanding what tools you have that are automatic, that you can pull out in any given situation. The idea of maybe what I said was not perceived the way I wanted it to be perceived, or maybe I understood something correctly or incorrectly based off of who said it. These sort of principles go into the way we interact with each other. And in this interactional field in the international world, it would behoove us to utilize lessons like this. And once again, I hope to be a practitioner. Right now I'm a student.
Yeah.
But pulling from the practice that I have had and the experiences that I have had, and I've had quite a bit of international interactions, maybe not at the high government level, but I would like to think that in most of the places that I've lived, utilizing these skills that I started learning when I was playing drums with Mr. Matola after seeing Anwar Marshall play the drums, it was like these same sort of skills have guided me and allowed me to be successful in high school, allowed me to be successful in college, allowed me to be a successful United States Marine. So I can only imagine that they're only going to inform me in positive ways as I move to this new foreign sector. So now I'm just finding myself in another space that I'm not familiar with. So here we go, rinse and repeat. But what do I know from that high school experience? What do I know from that Hungarian experience, that Russian experience, that Kyrgyz experience, that Azerbaijani experience? Pull that all, and now how can it inform how I learn, how I interact with those around me here? And I think that if I take that into the academic world, and more importantly, my follow-on professional endeavors, those will allow me to continue to see success. It's an assumption right now that must get tested, but unfortunately, only time can test this assumption. So I'm looking forward to carrying out the experiment.
Wonderful. Well, Denzell Ivery, thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciated this conversation.
Chris, it was a pleasure to come on. I'm glad to hear your thoughts, and glad I was able to over talk for a little bit of time.